I married him to pay my family's debt, but the cold CEO fell obsessed with the wife who never loved him. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The night rain drummed against the glass of a small apartment in downtown Chicago when Elena Carter's phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Her mother was asleep in the next room, hooked up to an oxygen tank, while bills stacked like a fortress on the kitchen counter. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Carter?" The voice was deep, deliberate, the kind that carried authority. "This is Adrian Steele. I have a proposal for you." The name alone made her straighten. Adrian Steele, CEO of Steele International. The man whose face graced every business magazine, known for his ruthlessness and precision. "I think you've got the wrong number," she said quickly, clutching her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "I don't," he replied calmly. "Your father owed my company $200,000 before he passed away. I'm willing to erase it. In exchange, you'll marry me." For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the hum of rain through the cracked window. "Marry you?" she echoed, disbelief breaking into a laugh that sounded more like a gasp. "This isn't funny." "I'm not joking," he said. "Think of it as a transaction. 1 year. No emotions, no strings attached. You'll have financial freedom. I'll have what I need." "And what exactly is that?" she asked. "A wife," he replied simply. There was no warmth in his tone, only calculation. Elena's mind spun. Her father's debt had crushed the family. Her younger brother was about to drop out of college. The hospital had stopped accepting payment plans. Every door she'd knocked on had closed. "Why me?" she finally whispered. "Because," he said after a pause, "you have nothing to lose, and I don't have time for love." The line clicked off. She sat frozen, phone still pressed to her ear, as the city thundered outside. The next morning, she found herself standing in front of a glass tower that scraped the clouds. Steele Enterprises. Her reflection in the lobby doors looked small, worn-out coat, nervous eyes, a woman about to sell her future to save her family. When the elevator opened, he was there. Adrian Steele, 6 feet of quiet power in a tailored charcoal suit, dark eyes unreadable. "Miss Carter," he greeted. "You came. You didn't give me much choice," she replied. "No one ever does," he said coolly. Inside his office, the air smelled of cedar and rain. A contract lay neatly on the table pages of conditions, clauses, and deadlines. He slid it toward her. "Sign this, and your family's debt disappears." She stared at the paper, then at him. "You could have anyone," she murmured. "Why a woman like me?" His jaw tightened. "Because women like you don't pretend to love for power. And I need something real enough to fool the world." The pen trembled in her hand. And, with one signature, her life would no longer be her own. 1 year, she said quietly. "After that, we go separate ways." "Agreed," he replied. His gaze flicked to her hand as the pen touched paper. "Congratulations, Mrs. Steele." Outside, the storm had stopped, but inside her chest, it had only begun. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Adrian Steele's penthouse like liquid gold over marble floors. Elena sat at the edge of a massive dining table, her fingers wrapped around a porcelain cup she was too nervous to drink from. Everything around her shimmered glass chandeliers, silverware, the quiet hum of wealth, but she felt like an intruder in another person's dream. The butler had greeted her as Mrs. Steele when she arrived, and the words still echoed in her mind, like a foreign language she did not understand. Adrian appeared moments later, crisp in a charcoal suit, cufflinks gleaming. "You will move in tomorrow," he said, not looking at her as he poured coffee. "The media will believe we married after a private engagement. My assistant will handle the press statement. Elena blinked. That fast? I do not see the point in wasting time, he replied. We have a contract. The sooner it begins, the sooner it ends. His calm tone made her chest tighten. It was not cruelty, it was indifference. To him, she was paperwork. She signed a paper. Now, she was part of his schedule. He handed her a small black card. This is for your wardrobe and personal expenses. You will attend functions as my wife. Nothing more. Our private lives remain separate. She stared at the card, realizing it probably contained more money than she had ever earned in her life. Understood, she said softly. For a moment, his eyes met hers cold. Steel gray, but something flickered there. A shadow of curiosity, quickly buried under professionalism. Claire, my housekeeper, will show you the guest suite. Guest suite, Elena repeated under her breath as she followed the elegant woman upstairs. The room was larger than her entire apartment. The windows looked out over the city skyline, where traffic shimmered like veins of light. If you need anything, Mrs. Steele, ring the bell, Claire said politely. Elena smiled faintly. Please, just Elena. But the older woman only nodded and left her alone. That night, Elena stood by the window, her reflection framed by the lights of Chicago. Somewhere out there, her brother probably still believed she had found a miracle job. Her mother thought she had received a scholarship. No one knew she had sold herself to save them. When the door clicked open behind her, she stiffened. Adrian's voice filled the silence. You can relax. I am not here to bother you. He stepped into the room, holding a folder. These are our event schedules for the next 2 months. Charity dinners, business galas, interviews. You will need to memorize dates and names. She took the folder, nodding quietly. Do you ever stop working? She asked before she could stop herself. His jaw flexed. Work is the only thing that does not disappoint me. The honesty in his tone startled her. I will do my part, she said. Good, he replied, turning to leave. Then, just before closing the door, he added, And Elena, do not let anyone see the cracks. We are perfect in public. That is the rule. The next evening, she attended her first gala beside him. Cameras flashed as they stepped out of the limousine, his hand resting lightly on her back. The air smelled of perfume and champagne, but all she could feel was the pounding of her heart. Inside, whispers followed them. That is Adrian Steele's new wife, someone murmured. No way. She looks so ordinary, another voice chuckled. Maybe he finally bought a conscience. She kept her chin up, repeating his rule in her mind. Perfect in public. When a reporter approached, Adrian's expression softened slightly. Smile, he murmured through his teeth, and she did. Under the glittering lights, they looked flawless, a power couple sculpted for the cameras. But behind the practiced smile, Elena's thoughts screamed with doubt. As the crowd applauded their arrival, she realized the truth. She had entered a world where love was a contract, trust was a myth, and her heart was just another asset on the balance sheet. Yet, somewhere deep inside, something fragile stirred a question she could not silence. What happens when the contract ends but the feelings refuse to follow? By the end of their first week as husband and wife, Elena had learned the rhythm of Adrian Steele's world: cold mornings, quiet meals, endless phone calls, and a man who spoke only when absolutely necessary. Every day began with the sound of his shoes crossing the marble hallway at 6 a.m. Every evening ended with him disappearing into his study long past midnight. To him, life was a schedule carved in glass. To her, it was a cage lined with gold. One afternoon, while reviewing charity invitations in the living room, she noticed a photograph on the shelf. It was a faded image of a younger Adrian beside a man who resembled him. She picked it up gently, brushing away a thin layer of dust. My father, Adrian, said suddenly behind her. His voice made her flinch. She turned, startled. As he stood by the doorway in rolled-up sleeves, a rare sight outside his usual suits. I did not mean to pry, she said quickly. You are curious. Most people are, he replied, walking over. He built this company. Every decision I make, every headline, every success, people think it is ambition. It is not. It is debt. The word hung heavy in the air. Elena looked at him differently then, realizing that perhaps she was not the only one living under the weight of obligation. You must have loved him, she said softly. Adrian gave a small, humorless laugh. Love? He never had time for that word. He believed love makes men weak. He turned away, his jaw tight. Do you believe that too? She asked, before she could stop herself. He hesitated. I used to. His answer lingered long after he left the room. That night, Elena found herself sitting on the balcony, the city glowing below like 1,000 unspoken confessions. For the first time, she wondered what kind of loneliness hides behind success. She wrapped her shawl tighter and whispered to herself, maybe we are both paying for someone else's choices. Days later, she attended a luncheon hosted by one of Adrian's investors, a polished woman named Victoria Hale. From the moment Elena entered the hall, she could feel eyes following her. Victoria approached with a glass of champagne and a smile that did not reach her eyes. Mrs. Steele, it is lovely to finally meet you. We were all so surprised when Adrian announced the marriage. It happened rather quickly. Did it not? Yes, it did, Elena said evenly. But sometimes life does not give you much time to think. Victoria's gaze sharpened. Or maybe you saw an opportunity too good to resist. The words cut, but Elena's expression did not falter. Believe what you wish, she said calmly. But you should know, not everything in this world has a price. The conversation drew the attention of several guests, and for a moment the room fell quiet. Adrian appeared beside her, his hand brushing her arm, an almost imperceptible gesture, but it carried warmth. Victoria, he said smoothly, my wife has more grace than most people in this room. You should learn from her. Victoria flushed, muttering an apology before walking away. When the crowd dispersed, Adrian leaned toward Elena and whispered, You handled that well. She smiled faintly. I have been poor all my life, Adrian. Insults are cheaper than bread. He stared at her for a long second, as if seeing her differently. That evening, as they rode home, silence stretched between them, but it was softer now, less suffocating. When they reached the penthouse, she moved to her room, but his voice stopped her. Elena, he said quietly, you did not deserve that today. Thank you. She turned back, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. You are welcome, she murmured. He hesitated, then added, Tomorrow night, there is a gala. You do not need to come if you are tired. She tilted her head. We are supposed to be perfect in public, remember? He almost smiled. Right, perfect in public. When he walked away, she caught the faintest curve at the corner of his lips, an expression she had never seen before. It was not arrogance or control. It was something dangerously close to human, and that frightened her more than his coldness ever had. The gala the next evening was held at the Grand Aurora Hotel, where crystal chandeliers sparkled like falling stars, and every step on the marble floor echoed with the weight of power and money. Elena adjusted her silver gown in the limousine mirror, her pulse quick and unsteady. Adrian sat beside her, silent as always, his gaze fixed on the city lights flashing past the tinted windows. You look appropriate, he said finally, his tone as cool as glass. She smirked faintly. Thank you, I think. The driver opened the door, and camera flashes greeted them the moment they stepped out. Adrian extended his hand to her. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing the warmth of his skin. Together they walked into the ballroom, every head turning as whispers rippled through the crowd. Elena had become an enigma, a mystery wife to the city's most private billionaire. As the orchestra played, Adrian guided her through the mingling guests. Smile, he murmured, and she obeyed, her face calm while her mind raced. For an hour she stood beside him as he discussed mergers, investments, and market shares, words that meant nothing to her but everything to the people surrounding them. Then, a voice broke through the chatter. Adrian Steele, the man of the hour, boomed a tall man with slicked, back hair and a grin too sharp to be friendly. And this must be your lovely bride. I am Charles Landon. Adrian's expression cooled instantly. Charles, he said evenly, I was not aware you were back in the country. You know me, Charles replied, his tone dripping with mock charm. I could not resist seeing who finally melted the great Steele's heart. He turned to Elena and offered his hand. Tell me, Mrs. Steele, how does it feel to marry a man who once claimed love was a liability? The question was loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Elena froze for a split second, but Adrian's hand tightened around hers. Careful, Charles, he warned softly. I would hate to embarrass you in front of your investors. Charles laughed, raising his glass. Just a joke, my friend. You know I admire you. Though, between us, she is quite the surprise. I expected someone more polished. The laughter that followed stung. Elena forced a polite smile, her nails digging into her palm. But instead of shrinking, she lifted her chin. Maybe that is the problem with expectations, she said calmly. They make people blind to what actually matters. The crowd went silent. Adrian's eyes flickered toward her, surprised. Then, slowly, he smiled not for the cameras, not for the deal, but because for the first time someone had defended him without expecting anything in return. The evening continued, and as the crowd thinned, Adrian led her to the balcony, overlooking the shimmering city. The cold air wrapped around them, sharp with the scent of rain. You did not have to answer him, he said quietly. I did not do it for you, she replied, eyes fixed on the skyline. I did it because no one deserves to be humiliated in public. He studied her for a moment. You are different, Elena. You do not play games like the others. Maybe that is because I cannot afford to, she said softly. I have spent too much of my life trying to survive to learn how to pretend. His gaze softened. You remind me of someone I used to know, he murmured. Someone who believed the world could be kind. Was she wrong? Elena asked. Adrian looked away. She died believing she was. Silence fell between them, broken only by the sound of the orchestra faintly playing inside. For the first time since their marriage, Elena saw something human behind his mask, a shadow of grief that refused to fade. When they returned home later that night, Adrian paused by her door. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For not pretending. And before she could respond, he walked away, leaving her standing in the quiet hall, wondering when the lines between contract and connection had begun to blur. The days following the gala unfolded with an unexpected calm. Adrian became less of a stranger and more of a presence, quiet, watchful, almost human. He no longer avoided the breakfast table or left before sunrise. Sometimes he would even ask, Did you sleep well? As if testing the sound of gentleness on his own tongue. Elena noticed small things. How he always stood by the window before a meeting, staring out like a man at war with his own reflection. Or how his voice softened when he said her name, even if just for a moment. Yet beneath the civility, the contract still hung between them like an invisible wall. One cold afternoon, Elena stood in the penthouse kitchen, trying to make soup the way her mother used to. Claire, the housekeeper, watched with amusement. The last Mrs. Steele never cooked, Claire remarked. Then she must have missed out, Elena replied, stirring the pot. When Adrian returned from work, the scent of homemade soup greeted him. You cooked? He asked, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Do not look so alarmed, she teased. It is edible, I promise. He sat across from her, removing his jacket, the tension in his shoulders easing. It smells better than half the restaurants I own, he admitted. They ate in silence for a while. Then he said quietly, My mother used to make something like this. Before she left. Elena looked up. She left? He nodded once. When I was 10, she said she could not live with my father's obsession for perfection. I used to think she was weak. Now, I think maybe she was just tired. There was no bitterness in his voice, only exhaustion. Elena reached across the table and, without thinking, touched his hand. No one should have to choose between love and peace, she said. For a brief second, his fingers tightened around hers before he pulled away. You talk like you have seen too much of both, he murmured. Maybe I have, she said softly. That night, as rain lashed against the windows, Adrian found her on the balcony again, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city below. You will catch a cold, he said, stepping beside her. I have had worse, she replied with a faint smile. He handed her a cup of hot tea. You should not have to, he said. They stood in silence, the air charged with something unspoken. Finally, she whispered, Why did you really marry me, Adrian? The truth, not the contract version. He hesitated. Because I needed someone the world could not buy. Someone who would not flatter me or play the game. And what did you find instead? She asked. His gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. A woman who makes me forget that this was ever a transaction. Her breath caught, the world narrowing to the space between them. But before she could speak, his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He looked down, his expression hardening. Work, he muttered. It always is. The next morning, everything felt different. Whispers floated through the business pages, rumors about Adrian's company facing a takeover bid. When Elena entered his study, she found him pacing, phone pressed to his ear. No, we do not negotiate with liars, he snapped, ending the call. His eyes met hers, sharp and cold again. I need you to stay out of sight for a few days. Things are about to get messy. Messy how? She asked. A rival firm is spreading lies. They want to ruin me. Then let me help, she insisted. You cannot fight this alone. This is not your war, Elena, he said, voice low. It is mine. But as he turned away, she saw something flicker behind his mask fear. Not for himself, but for her. That was when she realized the change had already begun. The man who once believed love made him weak was now terrified of losing it. The storm that Adrian had warned about arrived faster than anyone expected. Within days, the headlines were everywhere. Steele Enterprises under investigation. Anonymous insider leak rocks the company. Reporters camped outside the building, and even the security guards looked uneasy. Elena watched it unfold on television, her stomach twisting as talking heads debated whether Adrian Steele's empire was collapsing. When he finally came home that night, his tie was loosened, his voice raw. It is all fabricated, he said, dropping a stack of papers onto the coffee table. False documents, forged signatures, anonymous sources. Someone orchestrated this. Who would do that? She asked quietly. He met her eyes. Someone who knows me. Someone who knows how to hit where it hurts. The following morning, she overheard Claire whispering to another staff member about a name that kept resurfacing: Catherine Ward, Adrian's former assistant, a woman rumored to have been more than that. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. That evening, Adrian appeared in the doorway of her study. We are having dinner at the Carlton tomorrow, he said. The board wants to see that we are united. They need to believe in the illusion of stability. Illusion, she repeated softly. So that is what we are now? He hesitated. It is what we have to be. The dinner was a blur of polished silver, forced laughter, and sharp smiles. Adrian sat at the head of the table, every inch the controlled executive, while Elena played her part perfectly, smiling when necessary, nodding when spoken to. Across the table, Catherine Ward appeared, elegant and confident, her red dress gleaming like a warning. When their eyes met, Catherine's smile curved into something cruel. Mrs. Steele, she purred. I must say you are nothing like I imagined. Adrian always had such specific tastes. People change, Elena replied calmly. Maybe you just never knew him as well as you thought. Adrian's gaze flickered between them, the tension thick enough to choke on. After dinner, as they stepped outside into the night air, Elena finally asked, Is it her? Is Catherine behind this? Adrian's silence was answer enough. She wanted control of the company, he said at last. When I refused, she left. I thought that was the end of it. And now she wants revenge. Elena finished. I can handle it, he said sharply. I have handled worse. But his hands trembled when he reached for his keys. Back at the penthouse, she found him in his office hours later, staring at the city lights with a whiskey glass untouched beside him. You should rest, she said softly. You look exhausted. Rest is for men who can afford to lose, he replied. I cannot. She walked closer. Then let me help. How? His voice broke with frustration. You think a kind word can fix $1 billion conspiracy? No, she said, meeting his eyes. But maybe it can fix the man fighting it. Something inside him cracked at that, and for a fleeting moment, he let the mask slip. Do you know what terrifies me, Elena? He whispered. Not losing the company. Losing the only person who ever looked at me and did not see money. The confession hung in the air like thunder. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his cheek. Then, stop pushing me away. For the first time since their wedding, he did not. His hand found hers, holding it with a desperation that words could not hide. The storm outside raged against the glass, but in that moment, the real battle was the one between his pride and his heart. When she finally turned to leave, he said quietly, Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. She paused at the doorway, her voice barely above a whisper. Then do not start now, Adrian. And for the first time in his life, the man who built his world on control realized he was no longer in control of what mattered most. By the next morning, the headlines had turned vicious. Steel empire collapsing, sources claim internal betrayal. Photographs of Adrian storming out of the board meeting flashed across every channel. Reporters called their marriage a scandalous distraction. Tabloids questioned if Elena had been planted by a rival company. When she stepped out of the elevator that day, the lobby erupted with camera flashes. Mrs. Steele, is it true you married him for the money? Did you know about the fraud before the press did? Her bodyguards pulled her through the chaos. But the questions sliced through her like knives. Upstairs, Adrian was already waiting, anger blazing behind his calm mask. Why did you go out? He demanded. You knew the press would be circling. I went to see my mother, she said quietly, setting her bag down. I did not realize being your wife meant I had to ask permission to breathe. This is not about control, he snapped. This is about survival. They are tearing us apart. Maybe they would not have to, if you just told the truth, she said, voice trembling. You think that will stop them? He shot back. The world does not want truth, Elena. It wants blood. His words echoed in the silence that followed. She stared at him, realizing how far he had fallen into his own darkness. Then what do you want? She asked softly. Revenge? Redemption? He looked away. I want to win. That night, Elena could not sleep. Something about Catherine's involvement gnawed at her. And when she could no longer bear it, she slipped into Adrian's study. His laptop sat open, screens filled with spreadsheets, emails, and financial records. She scrolled through until she found it an encrypted file marked Ward Holdings. Her pulse quickened as she decrypted it using a password she had seen him type 100 times. What she found made her blood run cold. Multiple transfers from Steele Enterprises' subsidiary accounts to a private fund owned by Catherine Ward. It was proof that she had planted the fake evidence to frame Adrian. Elena printed the documents and tucked them into an envelope. She would show him in the morning. But before she could leave the room, the door opened. Adrian stood there, his eyes shadowed with disbelief. What are you doing? He asked, his tone low and dangerous. I found something, she said quickly. You need to see this. She handed him the papers, but he did not look. You were in my computer, he said instead, each word clipped and cold. You think I need your help now? You think I am too weak to fight my own battles? That is not what this is. she pleaded. I am trying to help you us. Us? He laughed bitterly. There is no us, Elena. There is a contract and a camera. That is all. The sting of his words hit harder than she expected. You do not mean that, she whispered. Do I not? His voice cracked for the first time. I warned you not to get involved. And I warned you not to become the man your father was, she said sharply. The silence that followed was brutal. Adrian's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened, but he said nothing. Finally, he turned away. I think you should leave. She stood frozen for a moment before whispering, Fine. She grabbed her coat and the envelope, the one that could have saved him, and walked out into the night. Rain poured as she stepped into the street, her heart breaking with each step. Back upstairs, Adrian sank into his chair, staring at the papers she had dropped on the floor. The proof of his innocence lay right there, but pride kept him from picking it up. He pressed his palms against his face, his breath ragged. For the first time, the man who once thought love was a liability realized that his pride had just cost him the only person who truly believed in him. The rain did not stop for 3 days. The city blurred behind sheets of water, and Elena's world shrank to a single suitcase and a rented room above a small bakery near the river. She avoided the news, though she could not escape the whispers. Adrian Steele's empire was collapsing, and so was the man she had once believed untouchable. Every headline carried his name, every article dissected their marriage. But what hurt most was the silence, the phone that never rang, the message that never came. On the 4th morning, she received a call from Claire. He has not left his office in 2 days, the older woman said quietly. He does not eat. He barely sleeps. Whatever happened between you two, it broke him. Elena closed her eyes, her hand trembling. I cannot go back, she whispered. He made that clear. Then at least clear his name, Claire said. I saw the papers you left. Catherine Ward is moving fast. If you do not act now, she wins. That night, Elena made her choice. She took the documents, slipped them into her bag, and went straight to the corporate headquarters, where the emergency board meeting was taking place. The building loomed against the storm, glass walls glowing like a beacon. Security tried to stop her, but she held up the file. Tell them I have proof, she said firmly. Inside the boardroom, tension was suffocating. Catherine stood at the far end of the table, smiling like a queen reclaiming her throne. It is over, Adrian, she said sweetly. The shareholders have lost faith. The vote to remove you is unanimous. Adrian sat in silence, his eyes empty, the weight of defeat hanging over him. That was when the doors burst open. Elena strode in, rain dripping from her hair, her voice cutting through the noise. Not so fast. Every head turned. Mrs. Steele, Catherine said, her smile faltering. You are not invited. I am not here for an invitation, Elena said coldly. I am here for the truth. She placed the folder on the table and opened it, revealing the printed transactions, signatures, and hidden accounts. These transfers came from your private fund, Catherine, the same fund that financed the forged evidence against Steele Enterprises. Gasps filled the room. Catherine's face went pale. That is absurd, she hissed. You cannot prove it. I already did, Elena replied. The accounts are under your name. The timestamp matches your resignation date. You tried to destroy him because he refused to make you his equal. Adrian finally looked up, disbelief and gratitude warring in his eyes. Elena, he murmured. But she kept her gaze on Catherine. You said he was heartless, that he only cared about power. But the truth is, he is the only one in this room who still believes integrity is worth more than greed. Catherine lunged forward, but the security guards were already moving. Within minutes, she was escorted out, her voice echoing down the hallway in furious denial. The board members sat in stunned silence. One of them finally spoke. The evidence is clear. Steele is cleared of all accusations. Relief flooded the room, but Adrian did not move. His eyes were fixed on Elena, as if afraid she might vanish again. When the others left, he rose slowly. "You saved me," he said, his voice rough. "No," she replied. "I just gave you back what was already yours, the truth." "And what about us?" he asked quietly. "Does the truth fix that too?" She hesitated, her heart pounding. "It depends," she said softly. "Are you still the man who believes love makes him weak?" He took a step closer, rein still clinging to his suit. "Not anymore," he whispered. "You proved love is the only thing that keeps me standing." For the first time in weeks, she smiled, a real one, small and trembling. "Then maybe there is still hope." As thunder rolled across the sky, Adrian reached for her hand, and this time, she did not pull away. In that boardroom, surrounded by the ghosts of ambition and betrayal, two broken people finally found what neither money nor power could ever buy each other. 3 months later, the world had already moved on from the chaos that nearly destroyed them. The headlines now read, "Steele Enterprises launches new foundation for financial recovery," and Elena's name stood proudly beside Adrian's on every press release. Together, they had transformed the company's scandal into a story of redemption. But inside their hearts, the wounds still took time to heal. One morning, as sunlight spilled through the windows of the newly built foundation office, Elena arranged a stack of donation letters on her desk. She smiled when she read one from a single mother who had kept her home thanks to their help. For the first time in years, Elena felt peace, real peace, the kind not bought by contracts or signatures. The door opened behind her, and she turned to see Adrian leaning against the frame. His tie loosened, that familiar mix of pride and softness in his eyes. "Busy saving the world again?" he teased. "Trying to," she said with a smile. "Someone has to balance out all your ruthless CEO energy." He chuckled, stepping closer. "You make me sound terrible." "You used to be," she teased back. He grinned, and for a moment the silence between them was filled not with tension, but with comfort. "Do you ever think about how it started?" he asked quietly. "The contract, the lies, the storm?" "Every day," she admitted, "but not with regret. Because if I had not married you for the wrong reason, I never would have learned what real love looks like." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Then maybe it is time to do it for the right reason." Her breath caught as he opened it, a simple gold band. No diamonds, no pretense, just sincerity. "Elena Carter Steele," he said softly. "The first time I asked you to marry me, it was a deal. This time it is a choice. Will you say yes?" Tears blurred her vision as she laughed through them. "You really had to ask?" He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the world seemed to pause around them. For the first time, there were no cameras, no shareholders, no press. Just them, two people who had lost everything and somehow found each other in the wreckage. Later that evening, they held a small ceremony at the rooftop garden of their building. No orchestra, no designer gowns, just a handful of friends, the scent of jasmine, and the soft hum of the city below. Claire read a short blessing, her voice trembling with emotion. And when Adrian kissed Elena under the fading sunset, the crowd applauded. "So, this is what love without a contract feels like," she whispered against his shoulder. "Better," he murmured, holding her close. "Because now it is forever." Weeks later, the foundation hosted its first annual gala for community rebuilding. Instead of the usual luxury, the event focused on second chances scholarships, debt relief programs, and mentorship for small business owners. At the center of it all stood a framed document, the very contract that had once defined their marriage, now marked with a red stamp that read, "Void." Beneath it was a plaque engraved with the words, "Love is not a transaction. It is a transformation." Guests paused to read it, some smiling, some wiping away tears. As the night went on, Adrian found Elena near the balcony, the same place where their story had started months ago. The city lights reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, He saw everything they had fought for: kindness, courage, and truth. "You know," she said softly, "for a man who thought love was a weakness, you have turned out to be quite the romantic." "Do not tell anyone," he said with a grin. "It will ruin my reputation." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder as the music swelled below them. "Adrian Steele," she whispered. "The man I married for debt, and the man I stayed for love." And as the stars stretched across the Chicago sky, their story came full circle. Not a tale of contracts and conditions, but one of redemption, trust, and the quiet, unstoppable power of love.